I don't know how to explain what's been happening to me. Maybe you'll think I'm crazy. Maybe I'm crazy. But I swear to you, every night someone or something calls my name from the forest behind my house. It started about a week ago. I live alone in a small, quiet town, one of those places where nothing ever really happens. My house is right on the edge of a dense forest, the kind that stretches for miles with no real paths, no reason for anyone to be out there after dark. It's peaceful during the day, but at night it feels different. The first time I heard it, I was in my kitchen, washing dishes after dinner. It was faint at first, barely more than a whisper carried on the wind. Ethan. I froze. Water kept running from the faucet, suds slipping between my fingers. I must have misheard it, I thought. Just my imagination. But then, clearer this time. Ethan. My name. From the trees. I turned off the water, my pulse suddenly loud in my ears. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out onto my back porch. The night was still, except for the occasional rustle of leaves. Crickets chirped. The wind was cold, but there was no one out there. Hello. My voice sounded small against the vast darkness. No answer. I waited a moment longer, scanning the tree line with my flashlight, but there was nothing but shadows. Finally, I shook it off and went back inside. I told myself it was the wind, maybe an animal, nothing to be afraid of. I was wrong. The second night. The next night, I heard it again. This time, I was in bed, half asleep, when I woke up suddenly with a strange feeling, like someone was watching me. I sat up, my room dimly lit by the moon through the window. And then, Ethan. My blood turned to ice. It was louder now, closer. I threw off the blankets and rushed to the window. My backyard stretched into darkness, the trees swaying slightly in the wind. My heart pounded in my chest. Who's there? I called out. Silence. I didn't sleep that night. The third night, I decided to tell my friend Caleb about it. We've been best friends since high school. He's the kind of guy who doesn't scare easily, always looking for a logical explanation for everything. You probably just heard an echo or something, he said when I told him. Sound carries weird out here. But it was my name, Caleb. He shrugged. Could be a prank. Maybe some kids messing with you. I wanted to believe him. But that night I found out it was something else. At exactly midnight, the voice came again. But this time, it wasn't just calling my name. Ethan, come outside. I felt my stomach drop. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The voice was wrong. It sounded like me, but not exactly like me. Like a recording that had been played one too many times, slightly distorted. I grabbed my phone and texted Caleb. Me, it's happening again. The voice. No reply. I tried to ignore it, pulling the covers over my head like a kid afraid of the dark. But the voice didn't stop. Ethan, come outside. Over and over. I was gripping my phone so tightly my fingers ached. Finally, after what felt like hours, exhaustion won, and I drifted into a restless sleep. The fourth night, I asked Caleb to stay over. If this thing happens again, I want you to hear it, I told him. So that night, we sat on my back porch waiting. It was cold, the air thick with silence. Caleb sipped a beer, glancing around every now and then. Midnight came. Then, at 12:05, Ethan. Caleb nearly dropped his drink. He turned to me, eyes wide. You heard that right, I whispered. He nodded slowly. Ethan, come outside. Caleb stood up, scanning the trees. No way. He shook his head. That's not normal. I exhaled shakily. Told you. For a long time, neither of us moved. Then Caleb did something I wasn't expecting. He called out. Who's there? Silence. Then, Caleb. His face went pale. We ran inside and locked the doors. Neither of us slept. The fifth night. By now, I was desperate for answers. Caleb and I decided to search the forest the next morning, in the daylight when it felt safer. We walked deeper than I ever had before, pushing through branches and thick undergrowth. The deeper we went, the quieter it became. No birds, no wind, just stillness. Then we found something. A clearing. And in the center of that clearing, a single object stood in the grass. A mirror. An old cracked mirror, its surface dirty and warped. I stepped closer, my heart hammering. What the hell is this? Caleb reached out, wiped the dust off the glass, and we saw something move behind us. Not a reflection. Something else. I don't know why I reached for it. Something about that mirror in the clearing pulled at me, like an invisible string wrapping around my spine, tugging me forward. My own reflection stared back, pale, shaken, but there was something off about it. Behind me, Caleb was breathing hard. "Ethan," he muttered. "Step back. I don't like this." I barely heard him. My fingers hovered inches from the glass. There was a smudge near the center, like a handprint, like someone had pressed against it from the other side. Then the reflection moved. Not me. Not in time with me. It tilted its head, just slightly, just enough to be wrong. I stumbled backward, nearly knocking into Caleb. "You saw that, right?" My voice came out in a shaky whisper. He didn't answer. I turned to him, and my stomach dropped. His eyes were wide, locked onto the mirror, his mouth slightly open, like he wanted to say something but couldn't. His entire body was rigid. And then, Ethan. That voice. But this time, it hadn't come from the trees. It had come from the mirror. A sudden escape. Something snapped inside me. My brain screamed run. I grabbed Caleb's arm and yanked him away from the clearing. He barely resisted, stumbling as I dragged him through the underbrush. Branches slapped against my face, scratching my skin, but I didn't care. We ran. Hard. I didn't stop until we burst through the trees, back into my yard. Only then did I let go of Caleb, bending over, hands on my knees, sucking in air. My legs were shaking. My whole body felt wrong. Caleb just stood there, silent. I waved a hand in front of his face. "Hey, talk to me, man." He blinked. His eyes refocused, like he was waking up from a deep sleep. "We shouldn't have gone in there," he said, voice flat. "We shouldn't have looked at that thing." No argument there. But there was something else, something he wasn't telling me. I knew that look. I'd seen it on him before once, when we were kids and he almost drowned in the lake. That same blank, haunted expression. "You saw something," I said. "Didn't you?" For a second, I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then finally, "It wasn't just your reflection that moved." I stared at him. "There was something behind you." The footsteps. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that mirror, that smudged handprint, the way my reflection wasn't me. Around 2 a.m., I heard it again. Footsteps. Not in the forest this time. On my porch. Slow, deliberate. I held my breath listening. A pause. Then, a knock. 3 sharp raps against the door. I sat up in bed, my skin crawling. My mind raced. I had locked the door. I knew I had locked it. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling. A text from Caleb. "Are you awake?" I swallowed hard and typed back. "Something's on my porch." 3 dots appeared. He was typing. Then, "Don't open the door." Like I needed to be told. I gripped my phone tighter, my pulse hammering in my ears. Another knock. louder this time. I opened the messaging app again. I think it's the voice. This time he called me. I picked up immediately. "What do?" I whispered. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, in the faintest voice, "Ethan, I'm not calling you." My stomach turned to ice. And then, from the speaker of my phone, "Ethan." The same voice that had been calling from the woods. But now it was inside the call. I threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, the call disconnecting. The knocking stopped. And then I heard the door handle turn. The figure in the yard. I didn't sleep. I sat in my bed, gripping the baseball bat I kept under the nightstand, staring at the door. It never opened. But I knew somehow that whatever was out there wasn't gone. By the time the sun rose, I was exhausted, my body aching from tension. I forced myself to get up, check the house. The front door was locked, still bolted, no signs of a break-in. But when I stepped onto the porch, my stomach dropped. Footprints, leading from the woods, right up to my door. I called Caleb. "We need to go back," I said. "What? No way, ma'am. There has to be a reason this is happening, and I think it has something to do with that mirror." Silence. Then finally, "I'll be there in an hour." The third visit. This time we weren't going alone. I called my cousin Sarah. She lived about an hour away, but growing up, she was the toughest person I knew. The kind of person who didn't take crap from anyone. She agreed to meet us at my place. When she arrived, she took one look at Caleb's face and said, "All right, tell me everything." So we did. She didn't laugh, didn't call us crazy, just listened, nodding slowly. When we finished, she stood up. "Then let's go." I blinked. "That easy?" She shrugged. "You think I'm letting my idiot cousin go back into haunted woods alone? Not a chance." So we went. The three of us, back through the trees, retracing our steps. And when we reached the clearing, the mirror was gone. Instead, in its place, a doorway. A tall, narrow archway made of something black and twisting, like charred roots woven together. The air around it hummed like static before a lightning strike. And from deep inside that impossible darkness, "Ethan, don't know what I was expecting. Maybe that the doorway was a trick of the light. Maybe that if I blinked, it would vanish. Maybe that this was all some fever dream I'd wake up from. But it wasn't. The archway was real. It stood there, unnatural and wrong, in the middle of the clearing where the mirror had been. The thing was made of something alive, blackened roots twisting, pulsing like veins under the bark. The space inside it was darker than anything I'd ever seen. Not just the absence of light, but something deeper, hungrier. And from that darkness, the voice came again. "Ethan." Sarah swore under her breath. Caleb took a step back. I should have turned and run. Every instinct screamed at me to get away. But something held me there, some force I couldn't name. That voice wasn't just calling me. It was waiting for me. The whispering forest. The air changed. A sudden wind tore through the trees, making the branches groan. The whispering started again, but this time it wasn't just my name. It was hundreds of voices, overlapping, murmuring things I couldn't understand. Sarah grabbed my arm. "Ethan, we need to leave. Now." I nodded numbly. But before I could move, Caleb screamed. I spun around just in time to see something pulling him backward. At first, I thought it was a shadow. But shadows don't grab people. It wrapped around his leg like smoke turning solid, dragging him toward the archway. He clawed at the dirt, kicking wildly, his eyes wide with terror. "Help me." I lunged forward, grabbing his arms. Sarah did the same. Together, We pulled with everything we had. For a second, it was like tug-of-war with something invisible. And then, the thing let go. Caleb scrambled backward, gasping. I pulled him to his feet, my heart hammering. But something was wrong. His face was pale, his hands were shaking, and his eyes. They were locked on something behind me. I turned. Something was coming out of the doorway. The thing in the archway, at first, it looked human. A figure, tall and thin, stepping forward. But as it moved into the light, my stomach turned to ice. It was me. Or at least, it looked like me. But its eyes were wrong. Too dark, too deep. Its smile stretched too wide. The way it moved wasn't natural, like a puppet with its strings cut. I couldn't breathe. It took another step forward, cocking its head. And then it spoke. "Ethan," it said in my own voice. "You don't belong here." My blood ran cold. Sarah grabbed my wrist. "We're leaving." But the thing in the archway just smiled. "You can't." Caleb was already backing away. "Ethan, come on, man." I took a step back, then another. The thing moved with me. A perfect mirror. No, not a mirror. A replacement. It took another step forward. Another. The gap between us shrinking. And then I realized. It was trying to take my place. If it walked out of that archway, if it crossed into our world, I wouldn't be me anymore. The chase I ran. I didn't even think. I just turned and bolted. Sarah and Caleb were right behind me. The trees blurred past us, branches slashing at my arms. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I didn't stop. Behind us, the voice called again. "Ethan." Closer. Too close. I risked a glance back. It was chasing us. Not running, just walking. But somehow, impossibly, it was keeping up. I ran harder. We burst out of the trees, back into my yard. I sprinted toward the house, fumbling for my keys. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped them. Caleb grabbed the handle and shoved the door open. We stumbled inside, slamming it shut behind us. Silence. I pressed my back against the door, gasping for air. Sarah was staring out the window. I followed her gaze. My stomach dropped. It was standing in the yard. Still, watching, smiling. The final warning. For hours, it didn't move. We sat in the living room, the curtains drawn, trying to come up with a plan. But what could we do? Call the cops. Tell them there was a monster in my yard that looked like me. Nobody would believe us. Midnight came, then 1 a.m., then 2. And finally, it was gone. Not gone, but when I looked out the window, the yard was empty. The next morning, Caleb left. Sarah stayed, but I could tell she was shaken. We didn't talk about what happened, not until the next night. Because at 3 a.m. I heard the voice again. But this time, it wasn't outside. It was in the house. It was right behind me. Didn't turn around. I couldn't. Every muscle in my body locked up, frozen in place. The voice had come from inside the house, right behind me. But the worst part, it wasn't just my voice anymore. It was layered, distorted, like multiple versions of me speaking at once. Some whispers, some echoes, all of them wrong. Ethan. I clenched my jaw, heart hammering. The air felt thick, suffocating. Slowly, I turned my head, and there it was. Me, standing in the hallway, just beyond the dim glow of the living room lamp. But it wasn't right. The thing's face was stretched slightly, its features too perfect. Like a wax figure mimicking human skin, its eyes were too dark, absorbing the light instead of reflecting it. And its smile, that godforsaken smile, Wide, unbroken, hungry. Sarah stirred on the couch beside me, blinking awake. She must have sensed something was wrong, because the second she saw my face, she stiffened. "Ethan," she whispered. I didn't respond. I was too busy staring at the thing in the hallway. It was staring back. Then it tilted its head. I don't know why, but that small movement sent a shock of terror through me. It was studying me, like it was deciding whether I was still necessary, like it was deciding if it was ready to replace me. Sarah's breath hitched. "Ethan, what the hell is that?" The thing smiled wider. Then it took a step toward us. No more running. I shot up from the couch so fast I knocked over the coffee table. Sarah yelped, but the thing didn't stop moving. Another step, and another. Its footfalls made no sound on the wooden floor. I stumbled back, reaching blindly for anything to use as a weapon. My fingers closed around a fire poker from the fireplace. Not much, but it was something. "Sarah," I whispered. "Go." She hesitated. "Go," I yelled, shoving her toward the door. The moment my voice echoed through the house, the thing lunged. I swung. The fire poker sliced through the air, but it didn't connect. The thing was gone. No sound, no movement, just vanished. I stood there, breathing hard, my grip white-knuckled around the fire poker. Sarah was halfway to the door, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. Then I felt breath on my neck. And the voice. "Ethan." I spun around, swinging wildly. But there was nothing there. My breathing was ragged, my vision swimming. Sarah grabbed my arm. "We need to leave," she whispered. I nodded. We bolted for the door. Back to the forest. We didn't stop running. Not until we reached the edge of the forest. Some part of me knew this started in the forest. It has to end in the forest. Sarah was right behind me, panting. "What's the plan, Ethan?" I didn't have one. But I did know one thing. If the doorway was still there, I had to close it. Because if I didn't, I wasn't getting out of this alive. The trees closed around us, shadows stretching long in the moonlight. The whispering had returned, rising and falling like the wind. And then we saw it. The archway. It was still there, the blackened roots pulsing, the space inside it shifting like a living shadow. And standing just in front of it was me. But now there were two of them. Both identical. Both staring at me. Both smiling. Sarah let out a choked breath. Oh, God! I couldn't move. They took a step forward, perfectly in sync. I gritted my teeth. No more running. I had to end this. The final confrontation. I stepped forward, gripping the fire poker tight. "If you're gonna take me," I growled, "you're gonna have to fight for it." The two figures stopped. Then, in perfect unison, they spoke. "We already have you." My stomach dropped. Their mouths didn't move. But I heard my voice echoing in my head. My own memories, my own thoughts, twisting, trying to make me doubt what was real. One of them extended its hand. "Come home, Ethan." I clenched my jaw. Then I charged. I swung the fire poker, aiming for the closest one. This time I hit something. The thing shrieked. Not a human scream, but something warped, like 100 voices screaming at once. The moment the poker made contact, its form glitched, flickering between shapes. Its face twisted, becoming mine, then Caleb's, then Sarah's, then something I didn't recognize. I shoved it back, heart racing. Sarah, the archway. She understood instantly. While I fought off the thing, she ran straight for the twisted roots of the arch. The second she reached it, she grabbed a rock and started smashing at the base. The whole forest shook. The whispers turned into screams. The second figure lunged for me. I dodged, barely, stumbling back as it swiped at my face. Sarah screamed my name. The archway was collapsing. The twisting roots cracked, crumbling inward. The dark space inside it pulsed violently, like a dying thing. The figures screamed. They both turned to me desperate. "Don't do this," they begged. "Ethan, please, you don't understand." But I did. If I didn't end this now, I would never be free. So I did the only thing I could. I grabbed one of the figures, my own double, and shoved it backward. Into the collapsing doorway. It fought, clawed at my arms, screamed in my voice. But I didn't stop. I forced it through, and the second its body hit the darkness, the archway imploded. A deafening boom split the air. The force knocked me back, sending me sprawling onto the dirt. Sarah landed beside me, and just like that, the archway was gone. The aftermath. The forest was silent. For the first time since this nightmare began, there were no whispers, no voices, just the sound of my own breathing. Sarah groaned, sitting up. "Is it over?" I swallowed hard. I didn't know. But when I turned back toward where the archway had been, there was nothing there, just an empty clearing. No doorway, no figures, no other me, just us. And for now, that had to be enough. Epilogue. The week has passed. Caleb won't talk about what happened. Sarah barely sleeps. And me. Every night at 3 a.m. I still wake up. Not because I hear anything. Not because I see anything. But because for just a split second, I feel like I'm not alone. Like something is still watching. Waiting. And sometimes when I pass by a mirror, I swear I see my reflection smiling, even when I'm not.